Good Friday this year, a few weeks ago, in the middle of the coronavirus, I took my grandkids up to the Summit Valley Cemetery to talk about the people that are from our Egland family heritage who passed away and the tragic deaths that they had experienced, and about the hope of the resurrection that we have for them. So I read the scripture from Revelation 7:17. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into the living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So we talked about the tears that were shed from these tragic deaths. Every death creates some sadness and tears, but in this family in particular, there have been many tragedies, and without the hope of the resurrection, it would have been hard to have dealt with these things. So, in the plot where Martin and Anna Egland are buried, in the corner is a little stone that was put there by my cousin Jeff for his older sister that was born before I was, but didn't live. So I was always considered the oldest cousin, but I'm really not. I never knew this girl. And Mom, do you remember her name that they gave her?
They just named her recently.
Yes.
But no, I don't remember.
They called her Jennifer. Because that was the name she picked originally. And then when she passed away, then they called the next daughter Jennifer. But they did call her Jennifer. Yeah, so they have two Jennifers.
So anyway, there's this little infant body that's buried there who I never got to know, and who was the first grandchild in the family. And of course, Dolores, her mother, mourned deeply because of that, and the other people in the family too. And Martin and Anna had a number of deaths in their family before they passed away, and particularly Anna, there were 5 of her children that died before she did. One of them, the first one, was just a 2-year-old baby girl named Emma, and they were living in Moscow, Idaho at the time. And if I remember, Mom, I think it was scarlet fever that she died. Was that right?
I think there's a
So
epidemic.
they were under quarantine, like a lot of people are now with the coronavirus. And the baby died. They couldn't go out to bury the baby, so they had to put the baby in a box and leave her out on the sidewalk in front of the house. And then some relatives came by and picked up the body and buried it. Well, their next child, of course, that was a lot of tears that must have occurred at that time. The next child was Bunny, or Martin Theodore. He's buried there in that same plot. And he'd gone into the service in World War II. And at 23 years old, in 1944, he was killed in Africa. He was communications personnel and had been running a phone line or some telegraph line when the vehicle hit the pole that he was on, killed him. So, of course, that was a great sadness for all the family, and you would remember that, wouldn't you, Mom?
She could probably tell us a little bit about Bunny.
Well, I'm emotional, I guess, also. We were really close with our cousins and our aunts and uncles. And Bunny was not, was he little, 6 years old? He was about 8 years older than I am. So he was like a cousin, really. And he was a lot of fun. And the night before he had to go into the service, he came down, said he wanted to come down and sleep with us kids. That was Harold and Dolores and Wally and I. And we couldn't decide where we could sleep, that many people. And he said, that's simple. We'll roll up in a blanket, each of us, and just be like wieners on the bed. So that's what we did. And he sang us to sleep singing an old spinning wheel. And the next day he was gone. We never saw him again because he was trained in England, and usually they could come home for leave after they went and took their basic training. But Bunny didn't get to see that. Yeah. And that was the last time I saw Bunny. So he was a very handsome, blonde Norwegian, and I loved him very much.
Well, also buried in that plot are Mom's aunt, Anna, and her husband, Dee Dee. And Anna and Dee Dee lived a long time. They were in their late 90s, I think, when they passed away. But there is also buried there their daughter, Yvonne. And Yvonne, how old was Yvonne when she passed away?
I think she was about 5 or 6.
Yeah, she was just a young girl. And their first child. And Anna mourned deeply for Yvonne. She didn't put away her clothes or her toys or anything, kept her room just like it was for a long time because she was having a difficult time. And I don't remember what Yvonne died of.
A large heart.
A large heart, yeah. So Anna mourned and all the family with her.
Mom said that Yvonne was beloved by the whole family.
She was, Anna and Dee Dee only had the one child then. And she was a really cute little blonde, and everybody thought she was really the only baby around it for a long time there. She was our very favorite little cousin.
And also in that cemetery is buried Mabel and her husband, Charlie Friswold, in that plot. And Charlie died in about 1936 or 35, we think. He'd been sick for quite a while.
It was cancer.
The cancer. And he was quite a bit older than Mabel. Mabel was only 16 when she got married. So when he died, it left their 2 children, Pete and Thelma, for Mabel to have to raise. And they were just little. I think they were probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years old. Pete might have been.
No,
Pete's younger. No, Pete's older than
Pete's older. He's the same age as Bunny. So
Okay.
there's quite a space between them.
So of course that was another tragic death in the family. Now Martin's buried there. That's our great-grandfather, Martin Egland. And his father's family had experienced a lot of tragedy too. So his father was Eric Egland. Eric was born in Norway and had come to the States, immigrated in the 1850s. And he was a soldier in the Civil War. And while he was in the war, his mother and his father in 1861, and then 2 of his sisters, Anne and Anna, died of diphtheria in a plague that came through Iowa. And also 2 of his brothers who were in the Civil War, Henrik and Peter, died during the war. So when he came home, he lost 6 of his family members while he was in the Civil War. And there were still 2 daughters and 2 sons, 2 brothers that survived. But he survived to become our ancestor. But certainly the hope of the resurrection means a lot for that family. Across the way from that plot is a plot where some more Eglands are buried. And one is Mel Egland and his wife Doris. And in that plot is their son Stanley. And Stanley was just 18 years old when he was in an accident with some horses that he was farming with. I believe, I don't remember if he was mowing or...
I don't know either, but
The horses spooked and he got ran
he got
over
wrecked, tangled in the...
in the equipment. and damaged his spleen.
Yeah, and he got like Bright's disease.
Bright's disease, and died not long after that. So he was another one of the cousins, Mom's cousins, that passed away, and he was pretty close to your age, right?
Yeah, he was Dolores' age, so he was 2 years younger.
So they had suffered that loss. And next to Mel and Doris are our grandma and grandpa, Irvin and May. And Grandpa got young too. He died, now that I think about it, fairly young. He was 10 years younger than me. But I thought he was pretty old at the time. And Grandma Egland, Anna Pearson Egland, was still alive. And she told Mom that he had come to visit her after he passed away, was standing by her bed one night. That she was grieving the loss of another child.
That was his mother
Yeah.
came to visit her. She said she didn't remember getting a message from him, but he was just standing there. She was awakened.
And her son Joe died before that. He was 59 when he died. And did he come to her also? I can't remember.
Not that I know.
Her brother came.
Yeah. It was her brother, Anna Pearson's brother, yeah, who was
John.
John, that died back in North Dakota. And they put his body in the granary because the ground was too frozen to bury him.
But I could tell a little bit about what he said. He came to visit her. And she said she awoke from her sleep and he was standing at her foot of her bed and he said, "I've come to say goodbye to you, Anna." And that was all that was said. And she said she thought that was quite odd. And she thought about it a lot, and she said it was a really strong impression that she had. And then a week later, we didn't cell phone each other. And it was winter time. She got a, what do you call those messages? Telegram saying that John had died, and it was on the night that she had the vision. He'd just come to say goodbye to her.
So just to review here, there were 5 of Anna's children that died before she did. First one was Emma, who was only 2 years old. The next one was Bunny, who was in the war, just 23. Then I believe it was Mabel, who was Charlie Friswell's wife in about 1960. And Joe, and Irvin. And Irvin was our grandpa. And he died in 1962, I believe.
He was born in 1900.
1899
1899.
was when he was born, yeah. So they had all those children die. Now buried with our grandma is Irvin, the other son. We talked about how he'd come and stood by the bed of his mother after he died. But our grandma May Schmid also had a tragedy. Her little brother Freddie died when she was a kid, and I can't remember. He was only like 5 or something, I think.
No, he was
Teenager.
teenager.
He was a teenager.
Yeah, I think probably 15 or 16.
Okay. And they just found him dead in bed, right?
Yeah, yes, mother found him in bed.
He had epilepsy. He had epilepsy.
Had epilepsy. So she experienced that loss of a dear brother that she mourned the rest of her life. Also buried there next to our grandma and grandpa is Carl and Hazel. They lived fairly long lives. And above them is Lillian, another daughter. And above Lillian is where our dad, Pete McCombs, is buried. And he never knew his grandma Campbell because Dad was born in 1927, but his grandmother died in 1919 of the Spanish influenza, the same week that her son-in-law, our grandpa Al McCombs, got back from the war. And he'd been exposed to the flu when he went over. In the ship, they had out of the Spanish influenza, and a lot of the soldiers were really sick, so he'd gotten sick, but had felt good enough that they used him to help carry the ones that were too sick to walk off the boat when they got there. And that same week, I believe it was, our grandma Campbell's sister Arva died in 1919 also. So she was 20, I think, when she died. So they lost two of those with the Spanish influenza. And then in 1920, my dad's parents, Al and Priscilla Campbell, or Al McCombs and Priscilla Campbell, lost a daughter, Sylvia. That was their first child. So my dad never knew that sister. And of course, that was another loss in the family. We could go back to my grandma Campbell's grandparents, 5 of whom of their family died crossing the plains of cholera, and her great-great-grandfather died of exertion. He was, her great-grandfather, I guess it was, died of exertion crossing the plains. He was in his 80s. So we have all of these tears that have been shed and sorrows as people lost their family members, but we are fortunate because of the resurrection and the atonement of Christ that these people who passed away will be reunited, and through the temple ordinances can have the opportunity to return to Heavenly Father, and we can know them and be with them and enjoy their company, those that we knew that have passed away and those that we haven't. Do you want to add more?
No, I think we've done it.
Well, I wanted her to tell about when Mabel visited Grandma after
Oh,
she
yeah.
passed.
Oh, yeah. And did we talk about
What happened with
my
Mabel?
mother's dream when they went to temple?
Go
Oh,
ahead
yeah.
and tell about
Those
it.
two,
I
yeah.
don't know if I remember too much.
Okay, which one first?
Do Mabel first and then do Grandma.
Okay. Mabel was Grandma's oldest daughter, and she relied on her a lot. So she really mourned when she lost Mabel. And Grant, her husband, had already died, so she's kind of. And so one night she said she was especially sad when she went to bed. She was crying, I guess. It seemed like she said that. Anyway, she said all of a sudden Mabel appeared to her, and all she said was, "Mom, I'm very happy where I'm at. Please don't mourn for me anymore." And she disappeared. Well, one thing she said that I thought was interesting, that Mabel was dressed like she always dressed, in a cotton little dress and an apron. And she said, "I didn't think that they would be, but I guess so you knew them, that's the way they were resurrected." Mm-hmm. And then about Mom and okay, Mom and Dad Dad didn't like me joining the church, and so I was spending my time trying to convince him that what I believed. And one time I went up there and I wrote him a letter, told him why I loved him and why it meant a lot to me for him to know that I knew the Book of Mormon was true. And I left that on his bed and left from Spokane. We lived in Spokane. So we didn't come back up there for about a month maybe. And Mom and I were sitting there, and Mom said, you know, I have a funny or an odd dream every day, every night. And I said, could that be? I said, what are you talking about? She said, every night when I fall asleep, I have this dream. It's just short, but I don't know what it means. And so she told me, she said she would go to, she was in this room, and there was another room attached to it, and there was a big room, and there were a lot of people in it. And she said, all of a sudden she looked, now Dad passed away several years before that. And so she said she looked in that other room, and there was Dad standing there. And she said, oh, and started running to him, and he said, no, you can't come to me. We're not married. And that's all the dream was. And I said, well, you're not married, Mom. You haven't been baptized. You haven't been to the temple. And she said, I'm so glad to know what that means. And so she immediately made plans. Well, I think she'd already been baptized.
She'd been baptized because she had that experience when she lived in a log house.
Yeah.
Really, it wasn't that, because Grandma and I got our patriarchal blessings together when I was 16. And she was living in a log house then, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember when she came over and wanted to talk to you about something, and then you told us about it. And after that, I think she decided to go to the temple. She'd been baptized.
Yeah, she had, and it was.
And your dad had been taking missionary discussions.
Yeah,
Before
Dad,
he died.
and I'd had him baptized in the temple, and everything was ready, but Mom was a little nervous about going to Cardston. You had to drive to Cardston for that, and it was winter time, and I don't remember as soon as we could get up there, we took Mom up, and we were sealed together. So at that time, I was an only child, but Harold has been baptized in Tennessee.
I guess that's our
That's
stories for today.